And welcome back to another roundup on Salmon's Pizzeria. Unfortunately for you guys, you're going to have to deal with me for the third week in a row. But fortunately for you guys, we have a celebrity joining us fresh off of Premier Sports. Ethan, how are you, Ethan?
I'm very good, mate. Thanks for asking. Cheers. Always told I had the face for radio, so that's quite reassuring to see that the camera was as well.
We will just get stuck in. I'm sure we will have a lot to talk about on that game. But we will start in Dingwall, where the weekend started because every single game seemed to kick off at a different time due to the weather. Ross County took all 3 points in a 2-1 win against Motherwell. A team that some fans, Ethan, seem to be kind of always wary of Don Cowie and going, oh, maybe we should be getting someone else in, especially with such a poor away run. Motherwell, Stuart Kettlewell doing pretty well. A lot of well in that sentence. But it was County who took all 3 points and a pretty decent showing too.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen of the game as well, it just kind of reinforces my opinion of Ross County furthermore. I thought at the tail end of last season, when Don Cowie first took in the reins, everything just looked so much more positive in terms of the performance, in terms of how they want to play. And I was just kind of thinking to myself, if it weren't for the fact that Aberdeen were doing so well, you could probably look at Ross County as the next sort of dark horses of the league in that regard. Always tipped to be in the bottom end. But right now, they're joint level points with Dundee, albeit Dundee have that game in hand. But they could very well end up being knocking on the door of the top six for just how tight nature this division is. And the quality of goals on display as well, I've got to say, absolutely fabulous. Now, everyone's going to be talking about Joshua Nisbet's winning goal because obviously it's the winning goal, it's the most decisive. And, he seems to scoop it into the air where it hangs for a good few seconds before it drops from the heavens into the net. But even just the first one for me, the control of Ronan Hale, he was always going to have a big task replacing Simon Murray, leading the line up front, being the main source of goal scoring. But just being that natural goal scorer, he's moved to a different level, but the goal doesn't change size, and that's proven there. That first touch that he takes on the ball in the box just sets him up to do a complete 180, get his body to turn towards goal, and then the finish. I mean, he was never in doubt, was he? But I think the setting up of the strike for me was more impressive than the actual finish. And that goal in the Joshua Nisbet goal, the overriding word for me is quality. They're quality goals from a side that have that kind of quality in their locker, and hence why they're doing so well. They're normally a tough team to beat, and if they continue to combine that with having those moments of magic, those moments of quality, then they'll be a real force to be reckoned with for sure. And that win against Motherwell, as you said, 5th place in the league, high flying not long ago. I think it says a lot more about Ross County than it does Motherwell.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you touched on that kind of, they are a hard team to play. I think they're the only team to go ahead against Celtic in the league this season. Albeit they took nothing, but they are the only team to go ahead against them. They have some strong players, as you mentioned there, both Ronan Hale and Joshua Nisbet on the score sheet. Kind of different. Nisbet obviously came from the A-League and was touted to be probably for a very big move, and for him to go to Ross County was a real surprise and an absolute coup for Ross County. But we'll go and we'll touch on Ronan Hale first, because as he said, it is a different level. He has stepped up a lot, but that's his 5th goal in the league, his 8th in all competitions. It takes him joint top of the goal scoring charts for the SPL Premiership. Do you think he's obviously managed that step up, but do you think there's kind of more to come from Ronan Hale?
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to find a natural goal scorer from any level because they can do the most important thing. If you're naturally a finisher, I think you can coach the rest of the other elements into a player's game. Coaching, finishing, you can improve a player's finishing, but to have that natural instinct to score on the first touch near enough every time, that's a lot more difficult to ingrain into a player than is positioning, than is timing your runs, timing your jumps and set pieces, etc. I think there's certainly a lot more to come. I mean, you said it yourself. He's top joint goal scorer in the Premiership. I think everyone's on 5 goals, and he's there on merit. And like I said, the goal he scored, that one in particular, I think they're all really. I can't think of a bad finish he's had. They've all been pretty decent goals, all quality finishes from what I can think of. And he was like that across Northern Ireland as well. I remember watching the full highlight reel of him, and he was scoring goals. I think one of the goals, famously, if it wasn't in his own box, it was like in his own final third, right? I think the goalkeeper came up for a corner kick, the ball back. Hale's just drifted a bit wide and then taking a shot on. And to score from that kind of distance from the other end of the park is insane. And that's what he's got in his locker. That's what Ross County have invested in. They've invested in the player who is a goal threat quite literally anywhere on the park. So, yeah, I think without a doubt, he's the kind of guy to me. What you're missing in a Lawrence Shanklin this season, where he'll essentially, or the Shanklin of old would essentially score everything that was kind of sniffed past him in the box. I think that's the kind of quality that Ronan Hale has. So you're going to see plenty more goals, I think, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was still maybe not top of the charts in the season, but certainly up there with the elite strikers.
Yeah, and just kind of finally then on Ronan Hale, you've seen it as well. Is something you kind of mentioned there is that kind of what Lawrence Shanklin doesn't have this season in terms of he's got that the finishing aspect and the kind of killer that you need in front of goals, but he also has that tenacity, doesn't he? The kind of bite, and we both saw it in person earlier this season when Dundee came up to Dingwall. But just how good is he? Not only working for himself, but working for the team.
Yeah, and that rubs off on the other players as well. Absolutely rubs off, because I was just about to say, when you talk about that kind of level of tenacity and hard work, that kind of sort of personifies the Don Cowie Ross County team from what I've seen of them. And another note that was dwindling in the back of my head, and I'm trying not to forget it as I ramble on. I think I've forgotten it. But yeah, no. Certainly, it rubs off on the rest of the team. And it's one thing when you talk about being a hard team to beat as well. That's kind of why. It takes hard work. It takes discipline. It's not a case that they just happen to be really, really good at annoying and being a nuisance to their opposition. No, there's actually a bit of a grind to it. There's a whole system element to it. And as I said, that requires a lot of hard work and a lot of awareness. You've got to be kind of on the clock 24/7. And Ross County are the kind of team that they can never really afford to get too high or get too low. They can never afford to get too low because they can find themselves in the relegation dogfight, and they have to have the mentality of, if they get smacked one week, they can bounce back the following with a win. And that's the exact thought I forgot. So this is great. It came full circle. That having that resilience and hard work, from your striker, who, if does the job correctly, is essentially your first line of defence. Like I say, that rubs off on everyone else, and it's such an important quality for a team of that stature to have, given the nature of their football team. Like I said, they can either be in the dogfight or they could happen to be shooting towards the top 6. We've seen them in the top 6 before. I can remember they were in the chase for Europe just a few years ago, where they finished third. They finished 6th in a 3-horse race between them, Dundee United and Motherwell. So, yeah, it's a quality that they're always going to need, I feel, for as long as they're going to be in the Scottish Premiership. And yeah, Ronan Hale sort of, I guess, personifies that. And because it rubs off on everyone else, it can only add to the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And on Motherwell, very mixed away form this season. I think it's 6 games, 3 wins, 3 losses on the road. But they'll have seen that as an opportunity to catch up on, well, they would have been thinking Dundee United, who sit just above them, but also an opportunity to catch up on Rangers because they dropped points at the weekend too. And so it's maybe an opportunity missed for Stuart Kettlewell's side.
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough to win games away from home, isn't it? I mean, they always talk about the home advantage, and especially going to a place as infamous as Dingwall. I mean, that was always the kind of the advantage those Highland teams seem to get in the Premiership, is going away over there was always a nightmare for visiting teams. Or at least that's from my perspective. It could be very well just Dundee got beat there all the time. But yeah, Motherwell's quite an interesting one because they can go from high flying and then taking a kind of poor defeat out of nowhere, but ultimately they're still fifth in the league. They're still sort of on track for where they want to be, what they want to do. I don't think it's the kind of defeat that will certainly derail them by any means. I completely expect them to pick themselves back up and go again the following week. And it's quite a funny one as well when you look at the form they've had earlier in the season, being such a strong outlet that they are. And one of the main talking points with surrounding Motherwell was the amount of injuries they had and how well they were doing because of these injuries. But then one of the problems you've got as these players begin to come back and integrate into the fold, from a plain one-dimensional view, you'd think, right, they're good players, they're coming back into the team, therefore the team can only improve. But it doesn't always necessarily work like that. You've got a team that's got a good thing going at the moment, and if you're having to take one or two out to integrate some old regulars back in, you're upsetting the system that was working so far potentially. When it's that's the whole philosophy of you don't change a winning team. Now I don't know exactly if that has been the case for Motherwell, but it was something that I did think about earlier in the season. That thinking when we talked about the injuries, I kind of thought to myself like actually a bit of a negative impact as well potentially if it's not managed correctly by Stuart Kettlewell. But obviously, I think given how well the season went for them so far, they won't have too many qualms. I mean, they'll be expecting that they can't win every game, of course, but they're still on track.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said there, it's maybe a chance for them to bounce back with Hibs next week. But for Ross County, they now have a double header with the Old Firm, and that will be a very very much needed 3 points for them going into those two games. We shall move on and we shall move to Perth, where more weather disruptions meant another delayed kickoff. But St Johnstone took on Kilmarnock and St Johnstone ran out the winners 1-0. They seem to be getting the better of Kilmarnock this season, as a few other sides have as well. What do you think's behind this kind of poor form from Kilmarnock? Because they seem to start really poorly and with a lot of red cards as they got at the weekend, but then they got out of this rut, and now they're very much back in it.
Yeah, so I'm most definitely going to be listening to some Kilmarnock podcast this week to get a bit more insight on that, because obviously that's who Dundee have got next. I was taking some notes today, trying to do actually a bit of background work to see if I can figure it out for myself, and it is a tough one to pinpoint because Dundee have played Killie I think already twice this season. There's about to be the third meeting. We're about to play them now in the end of November, and we may not see them again at all, depending on the outcomes of the split. So very familiar with how the sides deal with each other face to face, and it kind of all seems to kind of circulate from the beginning of the month when we played them at Dens Park. They went 2-0 up and we came back to win 3-2, and at the point they weren't doing so bad. They had just won at Tynecastle, I want to say, directly the game before, and our kind of feeling going into this was, we might be in for one here. The wrong time to play Kilmarnock, but of course we turned it around in part. At least on that particular occasion, a big deal that was Derek McInnes had a complete tactical blunder. He'd taken off Danny Armstrong and forgive me, my memory is not so sharp, but he essentially subbed off two players. One of them was Danny Armstrong when they had the front foot, and the idea was to get a bit more of a defensive structure to hold out the lead. But he did that far too early. I want to say it was maybe 50 minutes into the game. So he openly sacrificed the front foot for the remainder of the match. And from that point, just allowed Dundee to come at them wave after wave. And it's a tale as old as time. That lost in the game. Dundee came to win 3-2. And then watching Kilmarnock from that point on, I can put it down to that particular game was a tactical blunder. Following it through, I can't really seem to pinpoint it down to anything specifically like that again.
Because they were pretty good at home against Celtic. I think they found themselves very unfortunate to go into halftime behind. Never mind, they'd probably been hoping that they were ahead. Never mind level, but they end up losing that game 2-0. But there are a hell of a lot of positives for them to take from that, and then they go to Perth and they're a shadow of that team.
Part of it could genuinely be that maybe St Johnstone just happened to get it bang on the money, on the right day. That could very well be a factor. I mean, when a team gets beat, it's not necessarily because they were particularly very poor. It could be that the plaudits deserve to go the other way. But no, with Kilmarnock, there does seem to be some sort of impending self-destruct button somewhere down the line this season. We've seen time and time again. I mean, the disciplinary record for a start is abysmal. Now, for the Kilmarnock fans listening, I'm going to sympathise with you here because I don't think it's all down to the Kilmarnock team. I can remember one of the games this season against St Mirren where Sean Rooney got away with putting someone on the deck. Meanwhile, Joe Wright got sent off for essentially grazing his elbow against someone else. And that was absolutely ridiculous. But, that's the first one that comes to my head, of course. But the problem is they're still getting players sent off almost every week. They never seem to finish a game with 11 men. And that was a note I seem to have taken from the previous time that we played them. So that's certainly got to be a factor in some shape or form, but it's not the resounding reason why they're in this rut. And like I say, it's actually been quite hard for me to pinpoint that. And I get the feeling it's quite hard for Derek McInnes to pinpoint as well, because it's a squad of very good players. They were fourth last season, and no one could argue with it. For me, they probably could have even been challenging for third if they were a bit more screwed on. I thought they were that good. But yeah, no, it's very, very tough one to identify. But the thing is, when it's at Rugby Park, when the games are back at Rugby Park, you expect Kilmarnock to keep the front foot and play to their strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. But I suppose just as you said there, they have got a self-destruct button. I think that is 13 games so far this season, and that is the 5th league red card. So, what about St Johnstone then? They sit just above them in the table now. A huge, huge win for them. Not the most consistent team since their new manager has come in, but it's certainly an improvement on the football that Craig Levein had them playing.
Oh, yeah. Listen, it's night and day compared to Craig Levein ball. Absolutely night and day. I was there for Simo Valacari's first game out in the dugout as St Johnstone manager. That was at Dens, and my initial opinion on them was, again, similar to the vein of Don Cowie that I touched on earlier. It just seemed a lot more positive. I initially loved that he went to play the front three, Kempioka and Sidibe up front with Nicky Clark just in behind them. And that was the first indicator of, right, they're here to really have a go at this. That this isn't going to be throwing a couple of men behind the ball and hoping to catch the opposition on the counter-attack. This is, try and fire from all cylinders, try and go toe-to-toe. And on that particular day, they were the best team, and it wasn't really close. And I was completely expecting that to kind of build on. I then thought to myself, St Johnstone could really be onto something here. I mean, Valacari does have a bit of a winning pedigree when you look at his career. He's won trophies in just about every country he's managed in, with the lone exception of Norway, I believe, when he was manager of, forgive me if I absolutely butchered the pronunciation, is it Tromsø? The exact team that Kilmarnock played in Europe this season. That's the only team I think he failed to find silverware with, whereas every other country he was in, it came to be. So, and he's familiar with Scottish football to a fair degree, having played for Motherwell in the past. And he's one that he excites me. It really excites me. But they didn't seem to really kick on too much after that game at Dens. But now, as you see, they've taken on a Kilmarnock side, a Killie side who are normally quite robust. And, there wasn't an awful lot in the game. What really separated it was an outstanding cross from Raymond, Andre Raymond on the left. An outstanding delivery. That's the kind of delivery I would have expected from a Luke McCowan. Never mind this Trinidad and Tobago left back that just seems to have been pulled out of thin air. And obviously credit to Kirk as well for the header, because he just guides it so perfectly. To get beyond McCrory in the Kilmarnock goal. But no, St Johnstone have a bit of. I'm trying to think of the right terminology to word it without maybe sounding disrespectful, but the point I'm trying to get to here is they have a layer underneath them where they can play some really, really nice stuff and put opponents to the sword. And probably for Valacari, it's a matter of trying to get that with them most weeks. The exception for the whole Dundee game could be because the fans take it as this local rivalry, that local derby spirit that maybe gives them a bit more of an energy push. But of course, we know in reality it's never a fucking derby and it's not a real rivalry. But to them it is. To them it's the big day out. It's something much more. And it could genuinely be as simple as that.
Yeah, there are not many teams around Perth, so you're going to have to give them that one. But Mackenzie Kirk, as you said, he scored. I think that's his fourth goal for St Johnstone since signing there. Hearts fans were pretty disappointed to see him leave in the summer. St Johnstone fans were pretty depressed when he came in because they were looking for some defensive reinforcements. But it's gone pretty well for him so far. Probably he may have hoped for some more goals, but 4 goals is in all competitions is not a bad tally for a team who are known to struggle.
Yeah, I mean, when the top goal scorers are all on 5 and you're finding yourself on 4, that's not bad at all, is it? But I'll be entirely honest, I wasn't entirely familiar with his background. When he first signed for St Johnstone, I thought, oh, that must be the assistant manager's son. um, it was Andy Kirk. That was the conclusion I had drawn. But no, I don't think that is the case at all. And yeah, it actually has proved to be a pretty fruitful signing for St Johnstone so far. And probably was a case that, when you have someone like Nicky Clark, whose qualities are much different, I would think. To me, Clark has so much technical ability, creative ability, and very sharp positioning, and scores goals, but not particularly the main goal scorer. Nicky Clark's the only one of that forward line that is experienced the Scottish game, whereas obviously Kim Pioka and Sidibe, although they were there last season, travelled from elsewhere. So maybe was it just a case of having that forward that's a bit more familiar with the league, familiar with the game in this country, more familiar with the physical elements, to reinforce what was already a pretty banging front line for St Johnstone. And yeah, it just looks like it's the right piece of the puzzle. They recruited the right way, and the difference between St Johnstone's fortunes before and after seems to me, from my view anyway, the change of management where they're wanting to increase a more positive style of play.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you on that one. And like I said, they have leapfrogged their opponents, Kilmarnock, there onto 13 points, and in 9th, Kilmarnock sit above both of the Edinburgh teams on 12 points, but they are down there in the dogfight. We shall move on then to a not top of the table clash, but 3rd versus 4th. And yeah, this is another week where I don't want to talk about my own team. And I'm not so sure. This is maybe the most delightful one for Ethan, because I think you would have wanted both teams to lose if they could. But evidently they can't. And Rangers took on Dundee United at Ibrox and it finished level. Sam Dalby opened the scoring before Václav Černý returned for Rangers. Yeah, Ethan, it's looking pretty dim in Govan, isn't it?
Well, first of all, I would have much preferred Rangers won that game. Secondly, yeah, yeah, it's quite poor from the Rangers' perspective to drop points at home, because of course their whole nature's got to be they've got to win as many games as they can, not only to win the title, but at the very least to challenge Celtic. But at this current rate, they're not even challenging Aberdeen. There's such a large gap there, and what I will say, right, it's not often I'll direct the audience to watch something very specific, but the SPFL highlights on this particular game are awesome, because the audio completely cuts out when Černý scores, so it's followed by silence. So you see everyone celebrate with absolutely no volume in the background. And then there's one of the disallowed goals. You hear the VAR, the stadium announcer announced VAR checking for offside as the frame shows you he's a mile off, and the linesman is staring at it. But a very bizarre goal as well for Rangers to concede to begin with. I mean, Sam Dalby has been excellent for Dundee United so far, and scoring quite a lot of big goals. I think he's bound to be the biggest point earner in that United team. I'll need to check that later on and see if that's definitely true, but I want to say it is. My only issue with the goal itself is that when Dalby headers the ball, before he's really made the point of contact, Butland's already on the deck. Butland's dived before it's directed towards goal. It's like when you're playing FIFA, and not even like when your battery dies, just like you have some sort of bizarre lag on your goalkeeper. So there's got to be fingers pointed at the goalkeeper, I think, first and foremost, for that one, because that looks like it should have been maybe a bit straightforward. Dalby doesn't particularly header it quite hard. It's not doesn't look like it's directly in a corner either. It kind of looks like a tame effort if the keeper's a bit more sharp and a bit more aware. But regardless, it's actually still quite well worked from United in the regard that they've found the man they're looking for in the box, and he has enough space to kind of direct his body to guide the ball goalward. And then from that point on, it looked like Jack Walton had a very solid game in the sticks as well. He's been in most people's team of the week picks, and there was one particular double save as well that was outstanding. I can't remember who it was that takes the initial strike, but I want to say it was maybe Czerny on the follow up, and it's point blank range. He's maybe 2 yards away, and he's just stuck a hand out. And it's not just the fact he's managed to claw the ball away. It's like the hand is made out of steel and almost stops the whole thing dead. And obviously, because it's so close in, they just went to smash it. They went for power over precision just to ensure that it's the back of the net, and it wasn't enough. So Dundee United are certainly showing a level of credentials about them that I don't think anyone estimated going into the season. I thought they would need a bit more time to adjust. Regardless of the club size, I think when a team normally comes up from the Championship, there needs to be an adjustment period, and they've taken to the league like a duck to water, and that's sort of where Jim Goodwin deserves his flowers in that regard. They know how to get results, and yeah, they're absolutely flying. I think they're fourth place in the league right now, so
Yes.
they certainly deserve their plaudits. But as you say, for Rangers, it's a complete disaster, and they find themselves in the situation now, I think, where obviously the manager's going to be questioned. And the thought I had today, I was thinking about it. I had a walk at my lunchtime. I was generally thinking about the game because I just finished watching all the highlights, and I thought to myself, in regards to Clement, he's maybe not the problem, but then he's also maybe not the answer.
I think it's a good point. Yeah, I think that is a really good point. If I may, I'm going to make you praise Dundee United just a little bit more. But I think they were most people's picks to be down there with St Johnstone. And as you said, Jim Goodwin deserves his flowers. Dundee United fans, when the season was starting, when last season was over, didn't want Jim Goodwin in charge. They didn't think he'd done a good enough job in the Championship, and were probably hoping for somebody else to lead the line. How wrong they were.
How long was I? I was predicting him to be sacked at this point and Barry Robson to be the next Dundee United manager. So he's shut their passes, and he's shut mine too. I was a doubter completely. I kind of felt that he did do a good job initially in the Championship to get them back up, but I was still kind of thinking that maybe a big element of that was Wraith Rovers completely capitulating in the title fight. But no, there's not that same element of luck this time around. They're going to Ibrox, they're holding their own, they're taking the lead, and they've done enough to earn a point. They've won some really difficult games as well across the way. I mean, they won at Paisley against Stephen Robinson St Mirren side, who normally have an outstanding home record. I think that'll be one that we'll definitely have to check. I seem to recall thinking that when commentating there at some point last season, that the only home games they would have been beat were against the likes of Celtic and Rangers. And even then, I want to say that maybe at that particular point they hadn't even lost to Celtic, or maybe held them to a point or something. So they've won some very very important games where they were perhaps the underdogs, not expecting to take anything and taking the full 3 points. I remember they won at Tynecastle earlier in the season as well, and of course all these points added up. And I think the more that's kind of carried on for them, you can just see the confidence growing more and more across that United team. Because even now, when I look at it, man for man, it doesn't scream out the most exotic Premiership side. But what it does have is it has a lot of grind to it. It has a lot of experienced heads. And as I just stated there, it's a team playing with a lot of confidence. And sometimes it's not really a complex mix you need. It can just be really simple elements like that can carry a team really far. So yeah, I know you're making me praise United through gritted teeth, but it has to be said. It honestly has to be said, and completely fair play to them, and more fair play on finding obviously the boy Sam Dalby, because I think he was on the back burner at Wrexham. I don't think he had particularly a good goal scoring record. I think they had another striker initially signed to lead the line of a big physical stature. I'm trying to remember his name. I'd be false in calling him a Dutchman, I think, because I think he represents the Bonaire national team. I always forget his name for some reason. But they've obviously found someone of similar profile, but the difference is this one seems to have the goal-scoring touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hate to kind of go over these stats again, but that is, 10 games and 5 goals for Sam Dalby. As the famous quote goes, you do the math, that's a goal a game. But yeah, Rangers. I don't really know where to start. I am going to bring up a point that you said there, where you said he's not the problem, but he's certainly not the answer. But Philippe Clement, something that you see a lot of times, and especially with Rangers, is when the players have given up for a manager, the players have given up, and you absolutely see that. For me, although he is getting things wrong, it didn't look like that whatsoever. As you said, Jack Walton was called into action quite a few times, and on another day, maybe luck goes Rangers' way, and they do end up getting the winner. But it very much would have been kind of papering over the cracks. I guess it's now a big run of games for Rangers, and they do sit quite a distance away from the top two. 8 points away from Aberdeen and 11 points behind Celtic, and we're still in November. But do you think Philippe Clement will see out the season? I don't want that, because if you're it's easier for me to kind of sit here and go, I don't think he should, but I think he will. And I wonder if it's almost a message to the players in a way to kind of go, look, because I know that it's happened before, and players have thrown managers under the bus, and it's happened many times at Rangers, and especially in recent times. But I wonder if it's a case of whatever hierarchy we have left, which isn't much, kind of going, look, these players need to kind of get a rock up their arse, and if they're going to go, oh, we're not playing for a certain manager and we're just going to throw a half, well, we're not going to kind of bow down to them anymore. And to be fair, maybe because there's nobody left to bow down to these players at all.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's sort of this idea of opinion over realism, rather than should he go versus will he go. You talk about the hierarchy. That was kind of my main point with that was, if they were to sack him, who sacks him? So there didn't seem to be a CEO, there didn't seem to be a director of football, whereas
Well,
now
just
everything.
on that, sorry, just on that as well, our acting chairman John Gilligan is on holiday right now. So yeah, that he's maybe not even watched the game.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's quite funny. I mean, when everything's in turmoil, it's like, right, okay, guys, I'm in Benidorm. I'll see you in a week. It just kind of screams out the meme, doesn't it, with the dog drinking the cup of tea and the house is on fire.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
But yeah, no, it is a tough one to look at because, like I say, in regards to Philippe Clement, you talk about a rebuild. That's what they're all wanting. They're wanting this Rangers rebuild. And I remember seeing the post in the summer that the rebuild is commencing, and then I look at that lineup and I compare it to lineups I'd see last season. It's like, it doesn't really look all that different. At the core, that team is very much the same in my eyes. And it's also quite difficult to pinpoint, at least in Scotland, successful rebuilds well, there's been complete squad overhauls and it's worked out really well. I can maybe name the odd example, but I don't think there's many to choose from. And the ones I think that are successful, if we go a bit more high profile, I think the obvious one to look at would be if you go over to England. Um, we'll very well soon be seeing it with Man United, I reckon. But Arsenal are the first one to come to mind when Mikel Arteta comes in, has this whole rebuild, and now they're a side that compete for the Premier League title in that regard. And a big part of that was, you talk about players throwing managers under the bus. They were backing the manager for the longest time in order to kind of weed those players out, get rid of the deadwood. And maybe there's a case to make that Rangers may look at Philippe Clement of the same essence to say, well, this is a team that haven't just failed him, they've failed managers prior. So maybe it is this whole idea that we're backing the manager, he's going to stay in charge, and the players that will look to throw him under the bus will, in reality, they're throwing their Rangers careers away in the bin. Uh,
yeah,
so it possibly is, but there might just very well be an element of, because there's not really any stability higher up, they don't maybe feel comfortable calling the shots of such high magnitude.
yeah, and just for me, I think Philippe Clement will see the season out, and I have this kind of feeling. I was almost relegated to at the start of the season. There's never been a season that I've gone into and, not put my blue tinted specs on and gone, yeah, Rangers are going to win this league. I don't know how, but they're going to do it. This season was different, and I knew at the start of the season, I just had this expectation that it was very much Celtic's title to lose, and I didn't think they were going to lose it. I thought they would get better under Brendan Rodgers. I thought we would get slightly better, which hasn't been the case. But for me, I heard him say in the summer, look, this isn't something that's going to be a one window wonder. This is going to be something that takes 3-4 windows. And automatically I was relegated to the fact that, first of all, the board have probably said you're going to be here for 3 or 4 windows, and that's how long you have to get it right. And then, second of all, it also means if it's going to take 3 or 4 windows to fix, he's telling us that because that is what it's going to take. Not because it's like when he first came in and he said, I'm not Harry Potter, and then we started winning games again and people went, maybe he is Harry Potter. It was a simple case of he's saying that because he's warning you that we probably are going to have to go through some tough times. And this season is going to be the worst of it. Touch wood. But it's I was almost relegated to the fact that and maybe that was him changing the expectations, which a lot of fans have picked up on and don't like the fact that it is, it's rather than going, we were really bad today, it's going, oh, on another day we could have won this game. And it's changing that, like, it's a point picked up in Clement's eyes, whereas and I'm not saying that's what he thinks, but that's almost the kind of story that's told now. And for Rangers fan, it's obviously it's 2 points. It feels like a loss. It's 2 points dropped, but it feels like a loss. And I think that is it. He's moving the goalposts a little bit, and that's where he won't last long with Rangers fans. And I think the opinion of Rangers fans is very much known. It is out there. I was probably one of the last to switch sides, but I recognize that even in a rebuild, you can only go so far before it starts regressing, and that is what it seems like now. So my worry is that we get it wrong again, because we have, Michael Beale, we got it wrong with. Even Gio, to an extent, we got it wrong with in terms of backing him. I don't think we got it wrong with the appointment, but we got it wrong with backing him.
Yeah,
We
completely
definitely got
agree.
it wrong with pardon.
Completely agree.
We got it wrong with Michael Beale, and again, I wasn't disappointed with the appointment of Philippe Clement, but I wonder if again we've got the backing wrong, because in the summer there were very clear positions, and I think this is where it's been a negative whole season, because it's come from the summer where we've gone, well, this is what we want. We want rid of James Tavernier. We want rid of Connor Goldson. We want rid of these players. We want rid of Cyril Dessers, who's only been here for 1 year. We want rid of X, Y, and Z. We want 2 wingers. We want an attacking midfielder, another striker, and a right back. And what of that did we get? We got an attacking midfielder by Rami, who's now playing on the left wing. We got Cortez, who came in as a left wing, is injured. We've got Cherney, who's on loan and started poorly and is now probably our best player. I mean, it got to the fact that it was so bad. Yanis Hadji, who was pretty much told he played his last game for Rangers, is now playing more games for Rangers. So it's a mixed message from the top, and I think that is the problem. And there's so much contradiction throughout everything everyone says, and people are picking up on little things now which probably mean nothing, but in a world full of suspicious minds, mean a lot. I think Jack Butland said something after the Lyon game about our approach, and in the game after, Clement said Jack was in no man's land for the goal against Kilmarnock, and people going, oh, it's him throwing him under the bus because he said about the approach. And so it's a very, very toxic place. That
Yeah,
being said, we should probably move on, unless you were going to say something there.
I did have one more point to make on it. We're on about, like, realistically, is the idea to back him. I just had a thought in my head there, that he did have that contract extension at the start of the season when things weren't going particularly well. And that was maybe their way of trying to say, yeah, we are going to give you those 3-4 windows that you mentioned earlier. And it just got me thinking on a small spiral in regards to the fact, all right, look at Rangers now and compare Rangers when things were working out and they were successful. And the method for that success, ironically, probably was that kind of squad rebuild element I was on about, but it was a long term one. No one built the team in a single summer window. It was a case that when they brought in Steven Gerrard, he was there for, I want to say, was it 3 years before they'd won the
Yeah,
league? and it was this the slow burner process, increment by increment, to get to slowly build a team worthy of competing and winning the title. And they're maybe trying to go in for the same approach again with the idea of that contract extension earlier in the season. Um, and yeah, that is kind of the thing, isn't it? That the progress, the squad rebuild, the fans will always be on side if they see the progress. And I think that's the big thing for Rangers fans. They aren't seeing that progress. I think if I were a Rangers fan, I would look at it and I would say everything appears to be stagnating, if not going backwards. So no, it's just an interesting thought I had in my head in regards that maybe is the plan with them, is to kind of copy the same formula that worked with Steven Gerrard. And the one thing I'll give Rangers to their credit, I think you were absolutely spot on in regards to Van Bronckhorst. It was perhaps the right man in the wrong method, whereas Michael Beale was perhaps the wrong guy with the right method. I mean, if it were up to me, I think Van Bronckhorst would have still been Rangers manager now. I felt with the job that he'd done more than enough to prove that he was capable of getting more out of that Rangers team, deserving, in my mind, to build his own to compete domestically as well as in Europe that he already did. At the point when he leaves and Michael Beale comes in, suddenly there's all this money that wasn't there to be backed for Van Bronckhorst that was there for Beale. I want to say was it £12 million maybe spent on the likes of Lammers and Danilo.
Even more. I think Des
Yeah,
was cost around 4, Danilo was around 4, and Lammers was about 3.5. And then we also had players like, I think I just think there were so many players that came in that window, and there was no idea. We brought in Cifuentes, who came here when it's raining. What? Why am I playing football and it's raining? Like, what's going on? And all of a sudden, is shipped out on loan. Now he's having the time of his life in. I want to say he's in Cyprus now. He might be in. He's in one. He might be in Greece. He's definitely in a nicer country than Scotland anyway, weather-wise.
yeah. Well, again, that kind of sums it all up, doesn't it? It doesn't seem to be like there's a clear direction, a clear formula. But like I said, there is maybe a method in the madness now that I think about it in regards to that contract extension with Clement. That they got in my eyes, the right man, the wrong method with Van Bronckhorst, the wrong man, right method with Beale. And with Clement, it maybe is a case that they've thought, right, okay, we're going to take our time with this one, given the past mistakes. And the final thing I'll give them credit for is in regards to every managerial appointment, at the point when Gerrard left, I remember thinking Van Bronckhorst is the best possible man they could probably bring in terms of calibre, and I was quite doubtful they were going to get him, and they brought him in. Then when they sacked him, I didn't agree with the sacking, but I looked again at the same board and I thought, well, Michael Beale's doing really well at QPR, that's who they all want. He probably is the best man they could possibly bring in. Again, I was doubtful they would get him, and they brought him in. And then go for a third time. I thought Philippe Clement was the best option they could bring in. I didn't have any doubts about that though, because I don't think he was in a job. It seemed like it was between him and Muscat, if I remember correctly. And they brought in Clement. I thought, well, let's see if he looks a bit more impressive. Let's see how this goes. And all things started very well, and surprisingly very tight, I think, as well, because the start they had with Beale, they were miles behind the title race, and it took a real capitulation between Dens Park and Dingwall in an absolutely brutal week. It's effectively what cost Rangers the league. You can argue the Old Firm derbies as well. I just remember that being the kind of more pivotal point. So yeah, a lot of factors to really, I think, take in regards to Rangers and coming to managerial appointments and the formula it takes for success. So I think you've maybe got to ask yourself: do you trust these guys to start all over, or would you rather trust the manager who maybe is losing trust because you're not seeing the progress? But is it worthwhile to see that there is a vision down the line with him? I don't know, but he's certainly done enough, I think, in his background to show that. I don't think he. When they talk about the losing mentality, I don't put him in that category. I kind of look at it more in terms of the players are letting him down. But as I said, I think this can all be circled back to the question I raised earlier. He's maybe not the problem, but then again, is he also the answer? You put a gun to my head, I would probably say no, get rid of him. But at the same time, I don't feel there's a clear and obvious candidate to replace him at this moment in time either.
Yeah, and I think just on that, something you said there, obviously, I think it can be compared to the Gerrard time, and I almost feel slightly bad for Philippe Clement. I feel terribly bad for Steven Gerrard because he didn't get the backing, and that is probably ultimately why he didn't leave. Although he wanted to sign Kevin Nisbet, which I would argue is still better than Cyril Dessers. But it was a problem of, he's left because he's not got the backing, and as he said in an interview himself, you are 2 bad games away from the sack at Rangers. That is the pressure you are under. So he probably took an easier job in Aston Villa, and I understand. But like you said, there was a 3-year period where we built and built and built, and it was a hellish time until it got to that period where we won the title and everything was rosy again, and you're thinking, God, now we can really put the foot down. And in the 3 years following that, in the 3 years since Gerrard has left, I think it's just over 3 years now, it's all been undone and some more. And so
Yeah,
if it's going to take 3 years to redo that, Rangers fans aren't going to put up with that. I'm not going to put up, you're not going to put up with every 3 years, perhaps maybe winning a title and then going into this, dark corner for another 3 years and doing nothing. I know we had the kind of the Europa League run and we've had a couple cup wins, but last season really summed it up for me when James Tavernier, who's been here now for 8 years, 9 years actually, I think he's coming up on his 10th year. But anyways, at the time he'd been here for 8 years, and after we won the Premier Sports Cup final, an interview went over to him, and she went, "You've completed the set now," and I just thought, wow, like that's something that realistically there are Celtic players at that club right now which did in their first season complete
yeah,
the set, and that just shows that our captain, our Hall of Famer, has completed the set 8 years into his Rangers career. There's been a few things gone wrong, but we shall move on and
yeah,
give me a little bit of happiness because the next game is St Mirren versus Aberdeen, and Aberdeen finally lost. First of all, we are not joined by him in person, but we do have some great notes to listen to from our Aberdeen fan, Thomas. So, Thomas, take it away.
Aberdeen were second best in Paisley on Saturday. St Mirren deserved the 3 points, in my opinion, which pains me to say because usually my glasses are red tinted. But as I was a member of the press that day, thanks to Energy Sport and St Mirren for the opportunity, by the way, that's ENRG Sport, Edinburgh Napier Sport website, cheeky wee plug. I don't apologise. I had to have a balanced head. And thanks to that balanced head, I was able to see no, St. Mirren deserved it. Killian Phillips was energetic, tackling everybody, being a nuisance, and that's exactly what you want in a defensive midfielder. Just being an absolute unit, and he was a unit that day. I keep forgetting how tall he is. He's so lanky, but he's very, very strong. Richard Taylor, I thought, was very, very good at centre half. Obviously got the goal. Olasanya was probably my man of the match on St. Mirren's side, though. He was on the off, he was strong, he was fast, he was causing issues. His link-up play was decent. He was winning the ball in the air. Against Slobodan Rubezic is a hard thing to do. And all in all, St. Mirren deserved it. Aberdeen were too slow to get out the traps that evening. It was Duke, I thought, made an instant impact when he came off the bench. He was man of the match, in my opinion, on the Aberdeen side. Clarkson was trying his best through patient play, trying to find Sockler when he could in the first half, but him and Sockler were not communicating well enough. Got hooked half-time. Nisbet did what he could. He's an anonymous player sometimes, but pops up with a goal, which is what you want in a striker, really. But obviously didn't pop up with a goal. He fresher swiped in the lead-up to Jamie McGrath's goal. Gogic's foul. From my view in the media box, I didn't think it was a red card at the time. It's hefty and heavy, but I can understand John Beaton reversing it. But obviously I can see on both sides. If I was a fan in the stands, I would have been arguing all day, every day that was a red card. But All in all, there's arguments on both sides, and I think John Beaton on the day got it correct in the end. All in all, Aberdeen deserved to lose. Tulane was very level-headed, focused on the next game, gave St Mirren their credit, which is not usually what you see in a manager these days in Scotland. They'll try and deflect. They'll try and find blame on another particular issue, something around the club. But St Mirren have a lot of issues around hanging around the club, and it seemed to not let it bite them. Nor did the frosty weather bite them. So, all in all, St Mirren deserved it. Stormberta nearly. I slightly wish Stormberta cancelled it now, but all in all, long story short, in a professional point of view, very good to get my first match report of the season out again. I miss doing match reports. I used to do them at least once a month. But third year Edinburgh Napier has been quite tough. But Aberdeen point of view, we knew we were going to lose at some point. But as the manager says, next game, Hibs on Tuesday, which I've seen that Hibs are favourites for on some bookie sites, which is quite interesting to me. Hibs will be obviously they're not in a good place right now, but still have players who can be dangerous. Yuan on his day is a dangerous player. Boyle, Junior Hoylett, even though he's not got the same legs as he did a decade ago, he's still got a good delivery on him. So yeah, just looking forward to Tuesday. And yeah, long story short, Aberdeen second best. St Mirren deserved it.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Some great points there from you, but we shall move on. Ethan, St Mirren 2, Aberdeen 1. You already touched on Paisley being a difficult place to go for teams, and Dundee United have already done it this season, but Aberdeen couldn't do it, and they are a team who have very much struggled against St Mirren there.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I think was it last season? Was that the season with Aberdeen had the record of the longest time of a lead and then completely blown it? When Neil Warnock was in charge, I think Conor Barron scored in the first minute, and then Olasanya scored like the 98th to win it for St Mirren. Absolutely madness whenever they go up there. There's always a good game as well, mind you. There's always some good goals in display, and this is quite no different. Although for maybe different reasons. The opening goal from Olasanya alone, it's one of those goals that you watch where you look at a player and you're like, oh, I would love that in my team. And it is just like this drive from Olasanya. It's a long ball over the top from the keeper, Balcombe. And Olasanya, I think there's maybe 3 defenders in front of him, and he wrestles off each and every single one of them, beats them to the ball, threw it on goal and scores. And that's just drive. Like, that was not an element that required talent. That was just who wanted it most. Who was gonna work harder to get it. And Olasanya came out on top quite clearly. And that is a great embodiment of a Stephen Robinson St Mirren team as well, I think. And from there, that kind of sets the tone. It appeared that Aberdeen couldn't really seem to break St Mirren down. They couldn't really seem to test Balcombe from what I could see. If they were getting efforts, they weren't on target until I think maybe the lone one that they did found the back of the net. And it was a very fine finish from Jimmy McGrath. The ball opens up in a pocket of space, and he lasers it into the corner, and he scored against his former club. It just had to be him, didn't it? He has that ability to pick the lock, but of course it was going to have to be him to score against St Mirren. And then, surprisingly, the decider comes from a set piece, because Aberdeen, you're on about Ross County earlier, Aberdeen are the same mould. They've been doing so well because they can do the basics right, first and foremost. Very good at both ends and set pieces. But this was, again, it's simple. It's not complex. Stephen Robinson hasn't, sat down with a master bank heist plan on his desk to sell to his players. It was actually kind of straightforward and very black and white. The ball was raised highest for Taylor to rise highest, and he towers over the goalkeeper and he's not it in. And it looks so simple. Reality is it's not. It's not entirely as simple as I'm making it out to be. But it's just a typical St Mirren win, really. They can do everything, all the basics so well, especially on their own turf. They're first to every single ball, and they're tough to break down. And a lot of teams struggle against that. Aberdeen are no different, even with the tactical masterclass that is Jimmy Thielen. And I think Aberdeen fans, they're not going to. Okay, it sounds wrong when I say they'll accept it, right? Because I don't think any team, any fan base accepts a defeat, really. But in regards to this, I think that's what their second loss of the season, coupled only with the 6-0 drubbing at Hampden Park from Celtic in the semi-final. So I think they know they've been spoiled, and it's not one that'll dampen their spirit. The next Aberdeen game, I think you'll find the fans will still be right behind them, and that could just prove to be a very small bump of a very long and successful, fruitful road, as they're obviously looking to split the Old Firm.
Yeah, absolutely, and as you touched on, there is only their second loss of the season, and I don't think it's something that they'll take too much sorrow in, because I think to an extent it's probably not too disrespectful to Aberdeen to say, they knew this had to come eventually. They probably just wanted it to maybe last a few more weeks, but they do lose to a well organised St Mirren, and as you say, Richard Taylor from the set piece gets the winner. One moment which we haven't really talked about, much controversy over the weekend, but Alexander Gogic is shown a straight red. VAR then knocks it down to just a yellow. But for me, I'm just going to say mine, and I'll let you say your piece afterwards. But for me, I'm not sure it's even a foul. What did you think?
I'm the same. He's done nothing wrong. Like I'm a lot more. I don't care about all this nonsense of it could have been endangering, right? But it wasn't. You know what I mean? Like he's came in quite fast, but he's also taken like no one out in the process. He gets the ball right, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Does he win the ball completely as well?
Yeah.
I just remember seeing like the splash of the water more than the actual nature of the challenge, to be honest. But I remember looking at that thinking, yeah, that was pretty mental that not only did the referee, was he 100% convinced that would have been a sending off initially? Because bear in mind, that is like the criteria, right, from referees. They're only meant to give decisions if they're 100% certain. The VAR is only there to help if it has to apply for the clear and obvious. Thankfully it did apply and he wasn't sent off and it didn't ruin the game. But at the same time, he still pulls it back for a yellow card. And I just thought that was so strange. But then again, it might just be that I don't have a very strong grasp of the modern day rule book. Woke nonsense in my eyes. That was a fine challenge. He did nothing wrong. If anything, he deserved an award.
Yeah, and he's not too much of a stranger to a rash tackle, is Gogic. But St Mirren will be over the moon with the 3 points, and that moves them to sixth. Well, it moves them 3 points ahead of Dundee, albeit Dundee have the game in hand, of course. But yeah, another big win for Stephen Robinson and St Mirren as they kind of close in on Motherwell, Dundee United, and even Rangers now.
Yeah, I mean, last season the top six race predominantly that was more about sixth place than anything else, because Kilmarnock and St Mirren seemed to have the European race more or less wrapped up. Dundee did challenge in the European front come the split, but really the first game or the second game into the split when St Mirren beat Dundee at Dens, that was sort of already done. So that was a race between that was in that sixth place spot. It was Hibs, Dundee, and Motherwell. St Mirren getting in the top six was huge. Back to back, I wouldn't say, or is that the challenge for them this season? I remember there's a big deal made up of being back to back top six finishes, but I just thought that this season I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the top six. I said the same thing about Motherwell. I expect Motherwell to go that step beyond as well, to be challenging again. I wouldn't be surprised if they got there. But St Mirren for me were more bona fide than the rest of them because, like I say, sometimes being so simplistic is actually quite beautiful. Kilmarnock, as you say, are harbouring some problems. I don't see that happening with St Mirren. I don't think you ever really see that with a Stephen Robinson side anyway. We're talking about a guy that once upon a time took Motherwell to third place, which is mental. So, yeah, I'm not surprised to see how well they're doing. And they could very well be keeping that pressure up. Potentially overtake Dundee United and Motherwell as well. I reckon they've probably got a bit more in their locker than meets the eye in terms of versatility, in terms of having a plan B, changing the game plan if needs be. They strike me as a very robust side anyway. And I'm very annoyed they actually won. That was the one game I was looking for Aberdeen to win, so we can maybe nip back into the top six.
Aberdeen will have a chance to bounce back at Easter Road tomorrow night, or it will be tonight as this goes out. But Hibs are on suspect form, and I think after your first league loss of the season, you're probably wanting the games to come thick and fast. Jimmy Tulin will probably be quite looking forward to heading to Edinburgh.
Yeah, I mean, going ahead into that game against Hibs in the weekend, my first thought was we've got to kick them whilst they're down, and my only fear was that the international break had just finished, and that's obviously the opportunity to kind of click the reset button, stop and restart and go again. Momentum kind of goes out the window. That doesn't matter anymore because Hibs got absolutely pumped. So they're going to want to go to Edinburgh and kick them while they're still down. It doesn't feel fair. It's like, when the big school bully picks on like the kid walking on crutches. It's the Simpsons thing. Stop it. He's already dead.
You've summed that up pretty well, actually, and it actually rounds us up quite nicely because we will move on to Dens Park, where Dundee put 4 past a very, very struggling Hibs. You were obviously at the game and on television, may I add. Very, very impressed to be, alongside a TV celebrity. But Hibs started fast, get the goal. Then, of course, it all kind of goes downhill from there for Hibs. So after Nicky Cadden scored just 2 minutes in, Jordan Obita gets sent off in the 12th minute, and it wasn't even the biggest crime for most people because Eli Yuhan decided to do kicky-ups, and that was more of the focus than the red card. But Dundee had no mercy and didn't just fancy beating them, they beat them in style.
Well, I, for one, had a great time watching it. I thought it was a very good advert for Scottish football as well because it was an entertaining game. It has a bit of everything, doesn't it? A comeback, 5 goals in it, a red card, as you say, pundits foaming up the mouth over a boy doing keepy-ups. It's kind of a hard thing as well because I don't really know where to start. There's so much going on, but we'll do our best to kind of dissect it bit by bit. The appropriate note, I think, to go off is Hibs were the better team for the first 12 minutes. Dundee didn't get a finger on them, didn't have a sniff on them. Dundee were actually dreadful to begin with. And that was kind of my fear going into it was, again, the restart button's been clicked from the international break. It's not going to be the same Hibs side. And I'll be entirely fair with David Gray. That came across as a team that were looking to play for their manager in the opening 12 minutes before Jordan Obita decided to try and snap Mo Silva's leg. And the goal itself, I mean, they scored it before Dundee could really touch the ball. It was in like the opening minute, I think, just beyond the opening minute. I think it was in the second minute it went down as. Yeah. And it's a good finish from Cadden as well. I was beginning to bite my fingernails a little bit, thinking, here we go, because Dundee have this exceptional record, maybe the best record ever. When there's a team out of form, we knock them back into form again. It's insane. Like me and my family, we say it all the time that whenever there's a team on like a sticky run and they look at the fixture list, seeing Dundee there must bring a massive grin to their face, like a massive sigh of relief. And thankfully, we talked about Kilmarnock having that sort of self-destruct button within them. Hibs are no different. The phrase Hibs exists for a reason, but more so now than ever because what really strikes a tune with me. And I hate the fact I'm about to say this in front of a microphone in a recording, but if anyone can label themselves as a relegation specialist, it's me. I've seen it. I've lived it. I've been there. I was in the trenches. You weren't there, man. And the same way that I would argue there's a formula for teams winning leagues in regards to judging a team by its spine, there's similar formulas for teams in the relegation fight. And to give you 2 notes on that real quickly, the first one is you get absolutely no rub the green. You get no luck your way. This is one of those times because Hibs are looking like they're on the up. It's finally going to be a case that fortune will favour their way, and then it all just implodes. And it's of the same element of being able to snatch defeat at the jaws of victory. And when we last got relegated, we weren't really on course to win the game, but we were on course to getting a point at Easter Road. It looked like a tough place to go. Pardon me, sorry. They were going to sneak a nil-nil, and then the most bizarre own goal of all time. A cross comes in just outside the box. Paul McMullen's looked for a diving header to put up for a corner kick, and it's looped all the way into the back of the net, and it's this incredible own goal. If you've not seen it, I recommend you watch it. It's really a piece of art. And that was the decisive goal in that particular game in a relegation campaign for Dundee. That was the exact moment where I thought to myself, we're in a relegation fight. I've seen this story too many times. That's an example of, you get no rub the green and you've managed to snatch defeat at the jaws of a positive result. Hibs had that at Tannadice. They were 2-1 up against Dundee United. And then Joe Newell got himself sent off. Again, it's a similar repeat here with Dens Park. It all goes wrong from the sending off. And then United scored twice in stoppage time to beat Hibs. They were on the cusp of victory and completely, slipped back. They fell on their arse and they shat themselves on the way down. It couldn't have gotten any worse for them. And so I think you can see what I'm building at here. It's the same sort of scenario for Hibs. And what I really worry for them is you look at that fixture list, you really struggle to see where that next win comes from. If they got a result then and there, that's something to build on. I don't picture them getting a result against Aberdeen. They've got Motherwell away after that, and then they've got Celtic. And I look at that and I think, well, that's probably more likely to be curtains for David Gray. And there is a real shame about that, because as I said, those opening 12 minutes, you began to see what a David Gray Hibs team could be. And again, if the fixture list was maybe just a bit kinder, there maybe would be a second chance to see that. It's going to take a miracle now, and I just don't see where it comes from. Anyway, going further forward, some exceptional performances from the Dundee perspective. After the red card, they completely woke up. It felt a bit like a training drill at times. They could find their groove, get passing the ball, dominate possession, create chances, lead the high press with that extra man advantage. And Josh Mulligan was the main standout. He got all the man of match awards. He got it with BBC. He got it with Premier Sports. I think Lyle Cameron got the sponsors man of the match. And when I was on DTV, I personally gave it to Finlay Robertson. But Josh Mulligan was still the best player. We opted for Finlay Robertson just because Mulligan came off as a sub quite early, and so then Finn had played more of the game and had 2 assists to his name. But they were the two that stole the show, Mulligan and Robertson. Robertson sets up the first goal, and again, just a bit of tenacity. Takes the situation by the scruff of the neck, takes on 2 players, hits the byline, whips and across. And may I add, he's playing left back. He's a centre midfielder by trade, a right-footed centre midfielder by trade, and he's playing left wing back. Our player of the season so far would be our Ziad Larkesh, who we've got a loan from QPR. He's injured at the moment, so Robertson's had to step up, fill the boots exceptionally well, and it was a great finish from Jordan McGee to get us back in the game, who's now scored in back-to-back home games. I ran a stat earlier on the Dens Park Choir Twitter page. You should all check it out on X. It's a pretty good page. And it was that whenever Jordan McGee has played in a game for Dundee, over the 45-minute mark, over 45 minutes in a game for Dundee, he can boast a win percentage of 61.5%. He's scored the last 2 victories, both at the point when Dundee were trailing in the game. They were both equalising goals. So when you look at the games he's played in, that rut when Dundee that were stuck in, where they were losing games and throwing points away, McGee wasn't really involved with any of them. And there's quite a clear correlation that when Dundee are winning games and doing well, he's in the team, and that there's it's not a coincidence. He's absolutely integral to this Dundee side. And yeah, we got a bit of luck, I think, with the Triantis own goal, but we hit the woodwork several times, so we were knocking at the door. It was bound to come. And probably the goal of the weekend, just before half-time, when Joseph Bursic, he's received the pass back to him, and I don't even know, does he slip after the first touch? I still can't really make much sense of how it's happened, but Simon Murray and Seb Palmer-Holden have led the press. Palmer-Holden has managed to tackle the ball off of Bursic. Bursic's on the deck, and then Palmer-Holden's got an open goal to tap it into. It was there for everyone to see, especially the TV cameras. I think that they made the money back on that one highlight alone. Uh, yeah, and I mean that's another element they've got against them as well is Bursic. I'm not the kind that wants to sit here and slate players, um, but relegation teams tend to have goalkeepers that don't inspire confidence in the defence, and they don't tend to save many shots towards goal. And I think in terms of the goal conversion ratio for shots on target, Bursic is the second worst in the league for it, only beaten by Balcombe at St Mirren. And Balcombe's record is something like it's quite literally half the shots that go towards them end up in. So Bursic is right there at the foot of that table and at the foot of the Premiership table. You can't.
And the ball's not at his foot anymore. So
yeah. um, you can't blame it on one guy, but that is certainly a factor in part of Hibs' struggles. And for me, what was most mental was when the red card initially came. David Gray has to make a change. You're defending a 1-0 lead. No one would have blamed you if you're looking to bring on a bit of defensive stability, throw every man behind the ball, frustrate Dundee as much as you possibly can, and maybe you'll get away with 3 points if you're lucky, potentially a point, potentially. I said that on the mic at the time. They've got to look to get someone like Kwon on, someone that's good on the ball, can hold on to possession a bit longer. I wouldn't even been against the idea of them making a second change attacking-wise. If you have a more experienced player like Martin Boyle or Junior Hoylett that can just hold on to the ball, maybe a slight burst of pace, not necessarily for the threat of attack, but just to kind of take a bit more pressure off the guys behind them by dragging the ball as far away as they can. But there was no plan B for Hibs, and that's what cost them the game in my eyes. Not just the red card, but there was absolutely no attempt to fix things until they were already 2-1 down. At that point, the damage was more or less done. And then, we'll finish the game with Curtis Main scoring. The Hibs are caught passing on the back again. Lyle Cameron in with a slide challenge. That's probably been his biggest criticism. Lyle Cameron is that he's told he's not physical enough. Well, he was physical enough there, wins the ball. Simon Murray chips in as well, but then Cameron, a perfectly weighted pass. It's a good finish from Curtis Main, but the finish like that is only supplied because of the weight of the pass. Main said it first time and guided it in the back of the net. And that just kind of sums up the entire day. For Dundee, I've already given the praise to the three I think deserve it most, with Mulligan, Robertson and McGee. But really, to a man, everyone did so well. It was a great team performance. Clark Robertson had to go off injured, so again, it was quite pleasing to see a back three, a very inexperienced back three in regards to Scottish football, really hold their own, albeit against 10 men. But no, listen, I'm very happy with that, and we were really needing that. We were needing another win to get back on track. The previous game we'd been beat 4-1 off Aberdeen, so it was the perfect way is to reverse that scoreline in our favour in front of a home crowd. So now we look at the festive period where the games come thick and fast. We can go into that with momentum now, I think. It's Kilmarnock away next, which will be tough, but I see no reason why we couldn't get 3 points.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we move on from that game, just a quick stat there. Obviously, as you said, Curtis Main, not for all the Hibs reasons, but he does get the 92nd minute goal, which means Hibs, who have conceded 22 goals all season, in the league, that is, have conceded 10 of those in the last 15 minutes of games. Almost half of their goals against have come in the last 15 minutes of games, which is just preposterous. It shows a team that are almost, like Steven Gerrard said when he was Rangers manager, we would have won the league if games were only 80 minutes long. I think Hibs maybe would have finished 11th if games were only 80 minutes long, but still.
Well, the goal was also significant because that goal from Curtis Main was also the 100th goal scored in Tony Docherty's reign as Dundee manager, which for a team who's, for a manager who's only been in charge since last season, that's not even a year and a half yet, and the highest finish they've had is 6th. That's actually pretty good going as well. I saw that stat this morning.
Would you like the opportunity to, because I know you've been very vocal about Mr. Docherty, and you're obviously very much on the side that it is time to, just continue to back him, continue to support him, because why shouldn't you? This is a very strong Dundee side, and a lot of people out there are not so much calling for his head, but asking the question when I think in your response is the question really should not be even thought of.
Yeah, no, it's that's the thing. It's football fans are so fickle. The same voices that were hounding at him, they've all went quiet, and now they're completely on board again after one win really, or two wins if you count the kill game earlier in the month. Yeah, I couldn't believe it because my life supporting Dundee has been a life filled with instability. One problem after the other. If it wasn't financial issues and getting a new manager in so quickly, I mean. We've got a stat that we've been sitting on for a while with Dens Park Choir. We've never really had the opportunity to use it or the appropriate timing to use it. And it is like a comparison of managers appointed in Dundee's history from the club's beginning to the year 2000 and then compare it from 2000 to the modern day, which is effectively my lifetime. And the numbers are actually quite staggering. Like we've essentially appointed a manager, I think on average, once every year, 2 years. I don't even know. I just remember looking at it, and it's a jaw dropping figure. Um, and yeah, I mean, so in the face of all that instability and seeing so many squad overhauls over the years, it's so refreshing to see a manager that isn't just experience, but it had to be positive experience. That was the big thing for me. We've went down the rookie inexperience route, and whilst I'm not entirely against that, I don't think inexperience is innately a bad thing. I think that can mean new fresh ideas. Um, but certainly for a job for the size of a club of Dundee, there's only so many times you can hit it with the same bat and expect a different result. We didn't back that philosophy the correct way to the full help. And when you keep chopping and changing, you don't have stability, and then things ultimately go in the gutter. That's what happened with Dundee. That's, I think, why we find ourselves in trouble a lot of the time. So to have a manager to come in that knows the league really, really well, has had success, and big success winning the League Cup, European days with Aberdeen, splitting the Old Firm, to give him the job to be his own man, his own manager. I felt it was a very low risk appointment at the time, and of course, it's been a great appointment for Dundee. It's the best we've looked in the best part of 10 years, getting back in the top six in a European race for probably the first time in my lifetime. Really, I can only really call one time we were aiming for Europe, but realistically, we ended up finishing eighth. So yeah, I can't really stand the idea of calling for a manager's head after a few negative results. The whole thing you've got to look at when it comes to sacking a manager is where do you want to be and how far off are you from being there? If that question is get Dundee back in the top six and then mount a European challenge, fans were hounding for his head when we had a game in hand and 3 points off sixth place. And that just makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We will move on. We've both had our manager rants, both for different reasons, but we shall move on to the final game of the weekend then. Another sobering for Edinburgh sides. Hearts and Neil Critchley defeated again. Yeah, one that maybe I'm not so happy about, and there's not so much to talk about because it's Celtic that put 4 past the Jam Tarts. A pretty strong performance, despite Hearts looking okay up to probably the first Celtic goal.
Yeah, well, that's sometimes all it takes, doesn't it? That you can go into a game, a high-profile game, against a good side, even when you're struggling down there. You want to give yourselves a good account. I think it's fair to say that you raise your game a little bit when those kinds of games come to town, particularly when you're struggling, because you're already underdogs anyway. And then as soon as that first domino falls, the rest of them follow suit. And I've got to say, the opening goal is so incredibly jammy. I had to replay it and watch it twice. If I remember correctly, Beningame's intercepted the ball, and he's looked to clear it away, and his clearance hits off Maeda, and the rebound falls to the feet of Kyogo, who's then through on goal. Has a bit of a skirmish with Craig Gordon before he can round the keeper and score. And of course, you think, well, the last touch came off Maeda, so perhaps Kyogo's offside. And then you check the VAR replay, and someone is lazily standing back by about 10 feet and keeping Kyogo perfectly onside. So it's a complete fluke, really. But again, Celtic, you kind of feel it was going to be inevitable anyway. And Kyogo still has a fair bit to do as well. Again, Craig Gordon's not an easy keeper to beat, especially when he's right in front of you and he's 3 times your size. So yeah, Kyogo's done really well there to break the deadlock. Then I think, was it the second goal was a real moment of quality from Kuhn. I mean, it just lasers into the top corner from the angle he's at. I'm trying to remember if he cuts it on the right or if he just takes it on the left in a stride. I genuinely can't remember, and you could tell me it's either or, and I'd believe you because he's the kind of player with that level of quality. He can do both.
I close my eyes when he's in the ball. So
yeah, he's a real talent, a real shining talent. Every so often, Celtic kind of have that player where you know the eyes above and the bigger fish from the bigger ponds are looking down at them, and he's one of them. He's a very exciting talent. Really turning it on this season. Then it was Adam Ida that got the third.
he gets the fourth as well, and
He gets the fourth from a penalty.
Yeah, they're 2 goals don't pay 9.5 million. But is he going to start living up to that price tag?
Well, the thing is, you don't fully know what the mindset is in bringing him in because he is a young player as well. I think he's an exceptional striker. By the way, is he a £10 million striker? I would probably say no. However, I get the feeling they were maybe expecting an offer for Kyogo. I don't think that they brought Ida in to necessarily just be the second option. I think they were maybe anticipating some moving the waters for the first choice. But obviously he's still there and he will continue to be there for the foreseeable, even though there was that whole story that Fabrizio Romano declared with Manchester City looking at him, which was absolutely wild. But Ida, look, he's in a pretty not an awkward situation, but he's in a situation where whenever he's off the bench, he's got to make something happen to try and justify that price tag to keep the fans on side with him, because naturally that's going to demand quite a lot from the Celtic fans and a lot from the club as well that have had to push the boat out to sign him. And he's doing himself no harm by getting himself on the score sheet. I think he's done the right thing in claiming the penalty. I don't know if that is a structure that Brendan Rodgers has put in that he will automatically take the penalties if he's on the pitch and maybe penalty taker A and B aren't there. But James Forrest wins it and Ida goes to take it. So that simply has to be the way in my eyes. And it's not a bad thing when you've got more than one striker in a vein of form. I like how that's a headache that we've got just now with both Curtis Main and Palmer Holding on the score sheet. It's a great headache for Brendan Rodgers to have, even though you'd expect Kyogo to start. There's still games in Europe. There's still the cup final coming up. Don't rule him out. He might surprise you with some starts in some high profile games because he's a different profile of player to Kyogo. So tactically, he might suit different needs for what's required in different games. But I'll be honest, I can't, from the top of my head, I can't seem to recall that third goal. I remember seeing the penalty.
Musa Drama gets the goal for Hearts, and it's a pretty neat finish. Small wins is probably all Hearts can take from this, or small win. There weren't many positives to take from that second half, and it was a kind of Brendan Rodgers showing, especially as they do at Tynecastle, and he always seemed to get great results there. But a small win, as I say, and Musa Drama will probably be quite happy with that finish himself anyways.
Oh, yeah, that was a great strike. It's just a shame he's done it when they're getting beaten rather than it's, when it's level or to become an equaliser or anything. Very special strike. And I think Schmeichel even gets a hand to it and it's not enough to keep it out. And that's, again, also not an easy keeper to beat by any means. And that kind of maybe shows what it really takes to get something past Celtic. You really have to create something out of nothing, and it's got to be top notch. How many teams can really do that against them, and especially when it matters? You're counting on one hand here. Only one team have really successfully put them to the sword, and the best they could manage was a draw from 2 goals down. Still a massive, admirable effort from Aberdeen, of course. I'm not dissing it by any means, but that's the point I'm trying to draw, is that is the best that we've had against them across the full league. And I think Celtic are the only side in the country that are unbeaten, at least in the professional divisions. And I don't really see that ending anytime soon either. That's going to be a question I think you're going to find yourself asking around about Christmas time. And I don't think I've got any record of me saying it on a public podcast, which is a real shame. But I actually did call it with Rangers at the time when they won the league as well. I said around about Christmas time, they can do this invincible. They can go all the way without losing a game. And I think that it came true, did it not? They absolutely went invincible. Brendan Rodgers has done it before. Can they do it again? I think it will be very soon. We'll be asking ourselves that question. And I'll let you decide whether that sums up if it's a good state of affairs for a game to have, that if one team's not only running away with it quite comfortably, but they're running it to such a degree that it's like they're playing FIFA on the easiest difficulty setting, winning every game 4-1, 4-0, and just running away with it.
Yeah, you make me feel sick. I think that's a decent place to round it up then. Thank you very much, Ethan. We've had some great chats, and thank you, Thomas, for the voice notes. It was raining in Paisley, snowing in Edinburgh, but it was all about the Hale in Dingwall.